and welcome to Rauta's opinion videos. Since it has been a little bit of time since Therion's latest release got out, today I'm gonna talk you a little bit of Therion's music and tell you why, in my opinion, Therion is one of the most important bands, well, at least metal bands in the world, and why it is the most important kind of orchestral slash symphonic metal band in the world. So that's our today's topic, and since it's freezing cold in my garage gym, I'm gonna have a sip of hot coffee before we get it going. So as those of you know who are long-time Therion fans, it is a band of many albums, and been there for 30 years so far. It has released a tremendous amount of albums, live albums, compilations, singles and whatnot throughout the years. Those who just kind of got recently acquainted with Therion, with its beloved Antichrist, which came out not too long time ago, it's time to actually delve to the history of Therion and its music and make some points why some albums are better than the others. Now, Therion is a really interesting band in many aspects. It started as a totally different band than what it actually has evolved. But unlike many bands which started as a thrash metal albums and later on started playing death metal, or death metal bands that evolved to black metal or whatever, Therion has not gone through like one or two phases in their 30 years of career, but quite a few in fact. And one might actually claim that there is no two similar albums in the band's career. It's kind of a weird evolution that has gone through the band. And I'm not saying that all these changes throughout the year are actually good ones, because Therion is a very rare breed, kind of unique in a way that some albums are better when they are from the early parts of the career, and some albums are better in the band's later years. But there is no definite kind of a thin red line, the kind of a path you actually can follow and make it all kind of coherent, or kind of a, how to put it, logical way, pattern or anything like that. But since this video is gonna be long anyway, I rather start talking about the albums and tell my opinions, which one are the better and which ones are the worst, and if you're new to the band, which albums you should maybe totally skip and which ones you should actually probably focus, at least if your taste of music is anything like mine. So Therion didn't exactly start as an orchestral band. So what it was in the beginning. Those of you who have been following this Swedish band since the early years know that it started as a pure death metal band. But even as a pure death metal, it's kind of a, we have to use quotation marks to say pure, because Therion was not the band singing about serial killers or slasher movie type of murders and all that stuff, but something like Coca-Cola is destroying the world and killing the forests and all that stuff. So that is Of Darkness album, which came already in 1991. However, by that time band had existed something like 3 to 4 years already, 5 even if you count maybe the early phases when the band was using the moniker Blitzkrieg, named after Metallica obviously, or not so obviously, but anyway. And then Megatherion, and where it got its shortened version Therion, which I guess should be obvious to many people. Its meaning is beast. Now, when the Therion was doing its early stuff, it wasn't this kind of a occult band. It wasn't this orchestral band. It wasn't anything symphonic. I'm gonna skip the demos because this is all about basically dotting the line with the albums. So Of Darkness kind of was the game opener, and there was not so much anything new to the genre. But then again, Of Darkness being 1991, a death metal album from Sweden, it's actually one of the pioneering acts in a way. Maybe not as important, well, clearly, for reasons I'm not gonna even mention here. Maybe not as meaningful as like Entomb, Dismember, Carnage, and all that stuff, but still giving this kind of a early bird, hit to the scene. But quite soon after that, it already started changing and evolving, and Beyond Sanctorum came only a year later, representing totally different band. Well, these death metal band views or types of creating music and riffs and all that stuff could still be heard there, but the music was quite different. It wasn't anymore this kind of a Swedish death metal with the typical sound and vocals and all that stuff, but creating kind of a mutation, kind of a new breed that had these kind of orchestral ideas and something very experimental. In that sense, I totally respect this album and how the band already started changing with their second album. Well, it could have been even cooler if they did from the very beginning, but that's rarely how things get done. Anyway, in my opinion, Beyond Sanctorum is, even if it's more unique, I think it doesn't stand out in comparison to Of Darkness. Even if it's more Therion-like, it is not as good an album. Mainly because it's something that is still in the very early phase what the band would actually be. Now, Symphony Masses, Ho Dragon, Ho Megas came out 1993, followed by Lepaka Cliffoth 1995. Those two both took the necessary steps to take Therion even more forward with the music. That is, even more orchestral, even more opera singing, and kind of honing the whole idea what this band was actually going to be. So if we skip Of Darkness being the kind of a zero phase, this album of three albums would be, in my opinion, the kind of the first phase of Therion. And by the way, it was, I think, in 1995 when I was in my military service, when I actually found Therion through my friend. And I am 99% sure that it was Lepaka Cliffoth, which actually was the first Therion album and kind of blew my mind, being totally different than the other bands. And that is opera vocals, which I've been never into before Therion anyway. And kind of offering totally different perspective to metal. Not death metal, not black metal, not thrash metal, not heavy metal. Kind of a new kind of way to present music. So Lepaka Cliffoth in my books has kind of a special chapter in a way, a special page at least. But now that I went through the whole discography all over again, from the very first album Of Darkness to all the way to Not Beloved Antichrist, because I had already been listening with a few times prior to making the review, but the newest one album. So now Lepaka Cliffoth seemed to me a little bit kind of a raw, kind of a demo-ish, but still a kind of a testimony of its time, when it was got out. So in a way, very special album to me. But then again, there is a reason why I don't have it in my collection anymore, because I don't have albums in my collection when it's on like a sentimental, feeling kind of a thing. I only try to have those albums which I always like to listen, and Lepaka Cliffoth is clearly not that album anymore. But it's one of the albums in the early phases, of Therion, which I think is still something that should be checked out. Mainly because it was better than those two previous ones. It kind of had honed the idea a little bit further forward. But it is the last album, in my opinion, of the Phase 1. And when Phase 2, in my opinion, was out, that is with the album called Theli. Now, this album has totally horrible cover, now that we think of it nowadays. It is this late 90s or kind of a mid 90s computer graphics, and it looks bad to this eye. Even the album kind of sounds like a little bit plastic in a way, but the overall compositions, you know, the guitar work, be the production, the vocals, and the kind of catchy melodies and the kind of Therion kind of orchestrations are actually something that went to the next level, so to speak. For a long time, Theli was my kind of a go-to Therion album. Why? Just because I liked all the way down, you know, all the tracks, and there were some few tracks which were even more than the overall album feeling. But gotta say, when I did a, you know, write a review, kind of a classic review of Theli a couple of years ago, and I gave it quite a few spins back then, I felt it kind of lost the magic on me. It had kind of faded away. It was still there at, you know, at some amounts, and I still like it's one of the better albums, but it wasn't that Therion album to me anymore. Still something that kind of, you know, marks, in my opinion, the start of phase 2. Now, that was followed by, now I have to actually, you know, check out the list of albums which I have here, because I wouldn't remember all the pronunciation and all that stuff. So I Arab Sarag Lucid Dreaming came between Theli and Bovin back in 1997, and even when it came out, it was a huge disappointment because it felt like an awkward kind of a intermezzo album in a way. It wasn't like a real studio album, but then again, it was, you know, clearly having ideas which Theli already had. But being this kind of a, you know, not full studio album with full tracks and all that stuff, to me it makes kind of a clear why it has so much lower rating than Theli and the albums that actually came afterward. So to me this was a kind of a compilation album, and even shouldn't be one of the studio albums, but there it stands for reasons unknown to me. Anyway, that is the kind of album, if you're going to go through Therion discography, which you can easily just, you know, skip and keep moving forward. Now, Bovin came out in 1998, and that was kind of a going back to the way Theli was. And yet again, it was a great album during its time, and it still is now 20 years later, marking the kind of a 10-year spot for, or anniversary for Therion. It is still one of the better albums. Great melodic tunes. Now the orchestrations are on a kind of a new level. It doesn't suffer so much as the kind of a plastic feeling what Theli had, and you know, those opera vocals and all that. It's kind of a seamless. Well, that might have been the case already with Theli already, but I still think Bovin was kind of a part 2 of this newer phase of Therion, and definitely one of the better albums still to this day. Something that, you know, one of those albums that actually makes Therion stand out what it is to this day. Now, after that came yet another weird album called Crowning of Atlantis. Now this album has cover songs and whatnot, so it kind of feels like a compilation, much to like this lucid dreaming stuff. And I must say, this is one of those weaker links, the ones that actually kind of are stains to Therion's maybe best phase ever. You know, starting with Theli 1996 and going all the way to 2004 with Series B. Crowning of Atlantis is just some peculiar but not so good album. It's like this really dubious way to, you know, put out a full-length album but not actually have your own songs for a full-length, but kind of a semi collection and then some new songs, and it felt kind of very strong disappointment at the time, and even bigger disappointment nowadays. Well, in a sense that it came out, you know, between Bovin and Degia. Now, Degial or Degial, whichever pronunciation you feel like. That is actually one of the better albums, and kind of a Bovin or Telly Part 3 or Bovin Part 2. And I actually wanted to pick out this for the video because this is one of the more interesting releases which I got out. This is kind of a, yeah, you know, it's kind of a cloth covered, I don't know what it's called. It's kind of a soft feeling here, and it's, you know, it's kind of a, it's not bold, but you know, get the idea. It's kind of a this feeling, and this already gave a little bit of a nice feeling. This kind of a velvet cloth thing kind of gave the album a nice feeling, you know, because it was so different. Not just, you know, because the music was great, but as a release, one of those more beautiful releases. It's not like every day you get like a velvet-like of album. Anyway, that kind of got back to the proper way of creating Therion's music. So that kind of gave yet another hope for the band to make those great albums. But even Degial was, I think, shadowed by what came only 1 year later. Now you have to remember this: Theli 1996, Lucid Dream in 1997, Vo in 1998, Degial 2000, Crowning of Atlantis 1999, and then Secret of the Runes 2001. Only like a few years of span, and albums all, you know, like basically every year. And still, if we skip, you know, Lucid Dreaming and Crowning of Atlantis there with cover songs and all, the amount of productivity was like unknown to this band before. High level recordings, you know, be it production, be it vocals, be it, you know, these guitar melodies, orchestrations, everything is just like boom. This is the kind of a golden era of Therion, what I'm talking about here. And Secret of the Runes felt like it was the best Therion album ever for a very long time. Well, seemed so for a long time. It still is one of the better albums, and it has totally awesome ABBA cover song, Summer Night City, which is actually a pretty cool metal video as well. You can find it on YouTube still to this day, I think. And I think it's something that is like a good example, no, exceptional example how metal cover songs out of non-metal songs should be done. That ABBA cover is, I think, it's superb. It's one of those songs that kind of is really nice to have there. Not only because, you know, the Secret of the Runes is like a strong album with its all the, you know, songs, compositions, and all that stuff, but this kind of cover songs is like a, you know, icing on a cake. It kind of gives this idea what this band is capable of. Not only, you know, creating wonderful orchestrations and symphonic metal, but also being able to do non-metal songs to sound so excellent. So in my opinion, this cover is way better than, you know, like those Manowar cover or whatever on Crowning of Atlantis. So Secret of Runes, kind of a, well, it is one of the best Therion albums this year. This so far. It seems like this vacation of mine, which I had for 2 weeks, has totally melted my brain. But even though there was like 3 years of silence, well, not silence, because there were compilations, live albums, and EP, but then came something that I think holds the crown to hold Therion, and also sadly marks the end of this kind of a phase 2, if you will. That is when Lemuria / Series B double album came out. They are marked as a different albums, but they are also they were also released as a double album. And I actually have this deluxe edition, which I wanted to show you for the video. So this is a, let's put it this way, this is Series B on the other side and Lemuria on the other side. As you can see, this is a transparent deluxe edition cover, so with whatever way you want to turn it, it has this track list saying deluxe edition. and inside it has this kind of a double digipack release, which is wonderful to look at. And like said, like the cover is, it's turns, you know, this and that way. And one of the most interesting releases so far by this band, and you know, basically any metal band. It's a really nice double album concept, and one is of Lemurian, one is of Sirius B. So it's kind of a fantasy, kind of a mythology, kind of a space and all that stuff. But more importantly, maybe the best music Therion has ever put, in my opinion. Now, I had kind of a hard time balancing out which one would be the favorite of mine, but now that I was listening on my Vietnam trip, this double album, and I actually gave it an extra spin for both albums. I think Series B would be my pick of Therion. It's just like the overall level of compositions and, you know, songs. It's just like, in my opinion, kind of a mind-blowing in this genre. Lemury is a great album as well, like Secret Runes, Moving Dead Gel, Theli, but you know, Series B is something that it's kind of like spot on. It's like they nailed it, you know, better than even the previous times. But sadly, this double album also kind of marked the you know, end for the golden era of Therion, which in my opinion is the kind of a phase 2 of the whole band. Now, can't blame band for evolving and trying out new ideas and whatnot, but it took a few years and then came out Gothic Gabala. Visually stunning album, you know, like great packaging like the previous ones already, all the way since Theli or something. But this album kind of sounded, in my opinion, kind of a diluted version of Therion's music. Surely highly orchestrated, highly opera kind of feeling, and you know, all the elements, all the symphonic parts and everything was there, but kind of more like watered down version. It was something like, this is maybe like how Therion should, you know, sound like, but it still kind of felt like a copycat. Not like the real director of the band creating music, but somebody who has, you know, taken his place and, you know, cloned himself to look like this guy. It's a decent album. It surely has its moments, and it's kind of a totally, you know, something that gives you the Therion feeling there. You know, authentic Therion atmosphere is there. But the songs are just, you know, in my opinion, they were kind of a disappointment at the time. And I was kind of hoping that this album would actually sound better now that some 11 years have passed, but nope. But the thing is, this is one of the best songs of Therion of all time. Son of the Staves of Time, or should I remember correctly, is just mind-blowing. I didn't even remember that song was on this album, but when I, you know, played it, I was like getting goosebumps basically. And even a few days later, I still got this song ringing in my ears, and I was like, man, I didn't even remember this, you know, flawless song was there. And this is kind of ironic, considering that the rest of the album, like I said, it feels to me like watered down version of Therion. So not the album I totally suggest you to check out if you're unfamiliar with the album, but the song, it's just totally awesome. But Gothic Gapala, which started, in my opinion, the phase 3 of Therion, not the best album, not even top 10 probably. Something like, yeah, worth your time maybe, but not the one that would actually get you hooked to Therion's magic. Now, the sad thing is that Sitra Ahra, which came 2010, kinda did to Gothic Kabbalah what Gothic Kabbalah did to the previous ones. It was even more watered down version of Therion. And I was really disappointed on that album when it came out. and I wrote the review at the time, and I remember giving it a very low score for a Therion. Not very low score, like the overall feeling, but it felt like very mediocre album. Kind of an album that had very little to do with Therion except for the overall idea, having orchestration and operas and blah blah blah. And now that they gave it a new spin, it didn't feel that bad, but maybe only I wasn't disappointed because I kinda had my old expectations hanging over there already. So I wasn't expecting anything. I was kinda expected to get bored. I wasn't bored, but I surely wasn't actually enjoying the album. It was like, drinking water. Surely extinguishing your thirst for water, but nothing there else. No color, no. Nothing. Actually, I like water more than Citarara's album. Like kind of like in the Therion scale, it's horrible. Maybe even they're not worst, maybe, but it could be something that kind of ruined Therion for me in a way. Now, when Le Fleurs du Mal, the almost latest album, the latest prior to Beloved Antichrist, that came out 2012, and that had these kind of a chanson ideas, this kind of a French music, and that as a concept album was musically, in my opinion, better than Citarara. Maybe a lot weirder, but at least the band had gone to a, kind of a new gear, new shift. I don't know what to call it, but kind of trying something else, something that actually was not the typical Therion, but surely had these elements. The music on Les Fleurs de Mal, which means the flowers of evil, I think it's better in the way of Therion, just going for something totally different instead of milking a dead cow, which I think they did with Citarara. And like the first Les Fleurs du Mal, I don't know how to speak French, god damn it. The problem is that while it's actually something new Therion, some people could say that it marks the fourth or third phase of Therion, depending how you want to count it. But at least it's something different, and it's experimenting. It's kind of evolving the band again. But however, I try to kind of defend that I should actually like this album more than Citarara and stuff like that. Well, I do like it more than Citarara, but not more than Gale Gabala. The thing is that the album is kind of nice, but it isn't that Therion, anymore, which I kind of fell in love with, or 20 years prior to the release. But nevertheless, it has its ideas, and from that album to this majestic 3 CD piece of what we call Beloved Antichrist, it's not so different actually. Surely this one is a kind of theater play with 3 CDs and operas and then different ways or parts in play, but it's kind of a monotone, whereas Les Fleurs de Mal is kind of a this chanson music. So, but they're both actually trying something else. They are not able to deliver as the previous Therion albums, in my opinion. But at least we are trying to something else than like milking the dead cow, which I think Citarara was doing. But it's clear that last 10 years, in my opinion, has been very difficult for Therion. Now, when the golden era is long gone, and I don't ever expect to get another Sirius B or Secret of the Runes or even Telly, it's interesting to see which way the band is going to go. And now that I've seen the band a couple of times live, once in Wacken Outdoors Festival and once in Helsinki in a club environment, I must say that both of these live shows have proved that this band is very capable of performing both live as well as creating studio albums. Now, the Wacken gig was probably some 11, 12 years ago, so lots have changed. But this club show in Helsinki was something like maybe 6, 7 years ago, so not that far, basically, if you put all this 30 years of existence in a kind of a timeline and figure out how the band has evolved, changed, turned, twisted, and all that stuff. It's kind of heartbreaking to say that Therion isn't exactly the band it used to be. But then again, which band is? To me, it feels like Therion is now in the same phase with Metallica. Not maybe as old, but clearly more albums. But I think that Beloved Antichrist is like something which Metallica was doing with their kind of a Death Magnetic or the last album, kind of a redefining itself and yet still having the kind of a new ideas, the fresh approach to this music. But clearly not the band it used to be, that not the band that is something that delivering the fans what they are expecting. So maybe the kind of a load, reload, Saint Anger phase is now far gone with Therion standards as well, but still it's kind of a like I don't know, maybe age, maybe lack of creativity, maybe the kind of illusions, the grandeur, kind of a megalomania which is looming somewhere inside Mr. Director's Johansson's head, and I don't know. Who knows what Therion is capable in the coming years? But it is, with all these great albums in the past and these very unique ideas now and back then, all the way since Of Darkness, Therion is a majestic band, a unique kind of orchestra which has paved the road for bands like Nightwish and all that stuff, bringing these symphonic elements, bringing these orchestral elements to heavy metal, death metal, and all that is here on this kind of a metallic, essence, this kind of a bubble of all kind of ores and whatnot. And then there are these orchestrated and symphonic ideas and these classical instruments, and then overshadowing the whole idea is this kind of a occult, feeling, atmosphere, something magical that is, binding these two worlds together, making what Therion is actually all about. So, a great band, both live and best of the studio albums are just great to this day. My opinion is that Beloved Antichrist is not by far, the best album, even nowhere near what Therion is capable of. But I know many fans actually like the band's later approach. So if Therion is something that got you interested with nowadays album Beloved Antichrist, or in the past, or throughout the whole career, but you have some misses here and there, go check it out. It won't be disappointing, at least not always, but there will be surely some nice things and details to be found. So Therion, you have greatly deserved my deepest bows. Thank you for creating wonderful music, and for fans of Therion all around in the world, man, let's look into the future and see what it's gonna be. But meanwhile, let's stick to the good albums, and let's not the modern days disappointments disappoint us even more. I don't know if that makes any sense. But anyway, Therion, great band, great albums, with some misses. See you next time, and as always, drop your comments below or whatever. Subscribe to the channel as well. See ya.